It was supposed to be a normal family dinner, but the moment I spotted that unfamiliar piece of jewelry under the couch, everything changed. I stared at it, my heart pounding, as Terry brushed it off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Must have fallen out of your jewelry box," he said nonchalantly, turning his attention back to his plate. I didn't buy it. That delicate gold chain and pendant weren't mine. I knew every piece in my modest jewelry collection. This was something else entirely, something that didn't belong here. My gaze lingered on it, my mind racing with questions. "Terry, where did this come from?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged. "Beats me. It's nothing, Marlene. Don't worry about it." But I couldn't let it go. Something about his casual tone, the way he refused to meet my eyes, set off alarm bells in my head. Slowly, I bent down and picked up the pendant, feeling its weight in my palm. It wasn't cheap. In fact, it looked quite expensive. My stomach twisted with unease. "This isn't mine," I pressed, searching Terry's face for any hint of guilt or deception. "Whose is it?" Terry sighed, finally looking up from his plate. "Honestly, I have no idea. It must have just gotten lost in the couch cushions. It's probably nothing, sweetheart. Can we just enjoy our dinner?" I stared at him, my fingers tightening around the delicate chain. Enjoy our dinner? How could I, when this strange discovery had shattered the illusion of our simple, comfortable life? Something was going on, and Terry was clearly hiding it from me. "Marlene, please," Terry said, his voice tinged with exasperation. "Let's not make a big deal out of this, okay?" I swallowed hard, feeling a familiar sense of distance between us. Terry and I had been together for nearly 2 decades, but lately it felt like we were drifting apart. The easy intimacy we once shared had given way to long silences and averted gazes. And then there was the matter of my sister, Darcy. We had never been particularly close, but in recent months, her sudden lavish lifestyle had only fueled my own envy and resentment. How did she afford those designer clothes, that sleek new car? What was the source of her newfound wealth? I glanced up at Terry, searching his face for any sign of the man I had married all those years ago. But all I saw was a stranger, someone I no longer knew. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, setting the pendant down on the table. I can't ignore this, Terry. It's not like you to lose things like this, and Darcy has been coming around a lot more lately, flaunting her money. I can't help but wonder if there's a connection." Terry's eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I saw a flash of panic cross his features. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a mask of annoyance. "Darcy? What does she have to do with anything?" he snapped. "Marlene, you're reading way too much into this. It's just a piece of jewelry, for crying out loud. Let's just forget about it and enjoy the rest of our dinner, okay?" I opened my mouth to protest, but the sharp tone in his voice stopped me. Slowly I nodded, my gaze drifting back to the pendant. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I would not rest until I unraveled this mystery, even if it meant risking the fragile peace of our marriage. The uneasy feeling I'd had since discovering that strange pendant only intensified in the days that followed. Terry seemed more distant than ever, disappearing for long stretches of time with vague excuses about work or errands. And then there were the whispers I overheard, hushed conversations on the phone, hurried meetings with people I didn't recognize. It was all so suspicious, and it only fueled my growing paranoia. What was Terry hiding from me? And why did Darcy's sudden affluence seem to coincide with his odd behavior? I tried to confront him about it, but he would always brush me off, insisting that I was overreacting. "You're imagining things, Marlene," he would say, his tone laced with irritation. "Everything is fine. Just relax and stop worrying so much." But I couldn't relax, not when everything around me felt so off-kilter. I needed answers, and I was determined to find them, no matter what. One afternoon, as I was running errands in town, I caught sight of Darcy strutting down the sidewalk, her designer handbag dangling from her arm. I instinctively ducked behind a potted plant, watching as she sauntered into a high-end boutique, emerging a few minutes later with a swath of shopping bags. Rage bubbled up inside me as I watched her flaunt her wealth. How dare she prance around town, flaunting her lavish lifestyle, when Terry and I had always struggled to make ends meet? Something wasn't right, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. Summoning my courage, I marched into the boutique, confronting the saleswoman. "Excuse me, did that woman who just left make a large purchase here today?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The saleswoman eyed me warily. "I'm afraid I can't disclose any information about our customers," she said. I gritted my teeth, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "Look, I'm her sister, and I'm worried that something illegal might be going on," I said, lowering my voice. "Please, if you have any information that could help me, I need to know." The saleswoman hesitated, her gaze darting around the store. "Well, I suppose I could make an exception," she said finally, leaning in conspiratorially. "That woman, Darcy, was it? She's been in here several times in the past few weeks, making some pretty hefty purchases. Clothes, jewelry, you name it. And she always pays in cash." My heart sank as the pieces began to fall into place. Cash purchases, Darcy's sudden wealth, Terry's strange behavior, it all pointed to something sinister. "Thank you," I murmured, hurrying out of the store before the saleswoman could ask any more questions. As I walked home, my mind raced with possibilities. Was Darcy somehow involved with Terry's late-night meetings and disappearances? Were the two of them? No, I couldn't even bear to think it. The very idea of my own husband and sister conspiring against me was too much to bear. When I finally arrived home, Terry was sitting in the living room, thumbing through a magazine. He glanced up as I entered, his brow furrowing with concern. "Marlene, you look upset," he said, setting the magazine aside. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "I saw Darcy today," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "She was spending a lot of money at that new boutique downtown, and I can't help but notice that ever since she started coming around more, you've been acting strange." Terry's face paled, and for a moment I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but just as quickly it was replaced by a mask of indignation. "What are you implying, Marlene?" he snapped. "Are you accusing me of something?" I flinched at the venom in his voice, but I refused to back down. "I don't know what's going on, Terry, but I'm not going to just sit here and ignore it," I said, my hands clenched at my sides. "Something is going on between you and Darcy, and I'm going to find out what it is, even if I have to." "Enough," Terry interrupted, his voice rising. "I don't know what you think you know, but I can assure you, you're way off base. Darcy is my sister-in-law, for God's sake, and if you have a problem with her, that's your issue, not mine." He stood up, towering over me, his eyes blazing with anger. "I'm done with this conversation," he said, his voice low and menacing. "If you have any more unfounded accusations to make, save them for someone who cares." With that, he stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never seen him so angry, so defensive, and the way he had mentioned Darcy, it was almost as if he had let something slip, some small detail that had given away his guilt. I narrowed my eyes, determination hardening within me. I was going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. And if Terry and Darcy were truly conspiring against me, they would pay dearly for their betrayal. I couldn't let it go. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, and the more I thought about it, the more certain I became that Terry and Darcy were up to something nefarious. Their defensive reactions, their sudden wealth and lavish spending, it all pointed to a betrayal so deep and twisted that the mere thought of it made my stomach churn. I had to confront them, to demand the truth. I needed to know what they were hiding, and I wouldn't rest until I got the answers I sought. That night, as Terry sat in the living room watching TV, I steeled my nerves and approached him. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. He glanced up, his brow furrowing with annoyance. "I thought we already had this conversation, Marlene. I told you there's nothing going on." "That's not good enough, Terry," I said, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "I saw Darcy at the boutique, spending money like it was going out of style. And you've been acting strangely for months, the late-night meetings, the unexplained absences. I'm not an idiot, and I'm not going to just sit back and let you and Darcy keep on betraying me." Terry's face paled, and for a moment I saw a flash of panic in his eyes. But then his expression hardened, and he let out a frustrated sigh. "Marlene, you're being ridiculous," he snapped. "Darcy is my sister-in-law, for Christ's sake. If she's spending money, it's got nothing to do with me. And as for my work, you know I've been trying to pick up some extra hours to make ends meet. I don't know what you're accusing me of, but I can assure you, it's all in your head. I shook my head, refusing to back down. No, Terry. I saw the way you reacted when I mentioned Darcy. There's something going on between you two, and I'm going to find out what it is. But Terry's eyes narrowed, and he stood up, towering over me. That's enough, Marlene. I'm not going to stand here and listen to your ridiculous accusations. If you have a problem with Darcy, then that's your issue, not mine. But it is your issue, Terry, I cried, my voice rising in desperation. You're involved in this somehow, I know it, and I won't stop until I expose your betrayal and make you both pay for what you've done. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I had gone too far. Terry's face twisted with rage, and before I could react, he grabbed me by the arm, his grip painfully tight. Listen to me, Marlene, he hissed, his breath hot on my face. I'll say this one more time, and then I don't want to hear another word about it. There is nothing going on between Darcy and me, do you understand? If you keep pushing this, you're going to regret it. I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never seen him like this, so angry and aggressive. And in that moment, I knew that I was right. There was something they were hiding, something that they were willing to go to great lengths to keep secret. Slowly, I pulled my arm out of his grasp, my eyes narrowing with determination. I don't believe you, Terry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, and I'm going to find out the truth, even if it destroys us both. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there. His face a mask of fury. I knew that I had just drawn a line in the sand, and that there was no going back. Terry and Darcy had pushed me too far, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions. I was done playing the victim. It was time to take matters into my own hands and uncover the truth, no matter what it took. After my confrontation with Terry, I knew I had to act quickly. He and Darcy were clearly hiding something, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I couldn't rely on them to be honest with me. They had already proven themselves to be masters of deception. So I decided to take matters into my own hands and become a detective, tracing their every move and gathering as much evidence as I could. It was time to fight fire with fire. I started by keeping a close eye on Terry's comings and goings, noting the times he would leave the house and the people he would meet with. I even went so far as to follow him a few times, though I had to be careful to avoid being spotted. What I discovered only deepened my suspicions. Terry was meeting with Darcy in secret, often in secluded locations around town. They would talk in hushed tones, their body language tense and guarded. And when they parted ways, Darcy would invariably leave with a stack of cash or a new piece of expensive jewelry. The pieces were starting to fall into place. It was clear that Terry and Darcy were somehow working together, and that their relationship went far beyond the typical sibling bond. But what were they up to? And how did it all tie back to my inheritance? I knew I needed to dig deeper to find concrete evidence of their betrayal. So I started scouring Terry's financial records, looking for any suspicious activity. And that's when I found it. A series of large cash withdrawals and electronic transfers, all of which seemed to coincide with Darcy's lavish spending sprees. My heart sank as the realization hit me. Terry and Darcy were siphoning off my inheritance, using my own money to fund Darcy's luxurious lifestyle and Terry's gambling addiction. It was a betrayal so deep and twisted that I could barely even process it. I confronted Terry again, this time armed with the evidence I had gathered. He tried to deny it at first, his face turning pale with panic, but I refused to back down. I laid out the facts one by one until he had no choice but to admit the truth. "All right, fine," he snapped, his eyes darting around the room as if he was looking for an escape. "Darcy and we've been taking money from your inheritance. But it's not what you think, Marlene. We were just trying to make ends meet, that's all." I stared at him, my hands trembling with rage. Make ends meet? By stealing my money? I spat. Do you have any idea how hard I worked to build up that inheritance? And you and Darcy thought you could just waltz in and take it for yourselves? Terry opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. No, don't even try to justify it. What you two have done is unforgivable. You've betrayed me, betrayed our marriage, all for your own selfish gain. And I'm going to make you both pay for it. With that, I turned and stormed out of the room, my mind racing with a million different thoughts. I had to figure out a way to stop them, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. And I knew exactly who to turn to for help. Elliot, an old friend from my college days, had gone on to become a successful lawyer. He had always been there for me, and I knew I could trust him to handle this situation with the utmost discretion and professionalism. I called him up, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. To his credit, Elliot listened patiently, his brow furrowing with concern as I laid out the details. "This is a serious matter, Marlene," he said, his voice low and serious. "But don't worry, I'll help you get to the bottom of this. We'll set a trap for Terry and Darcy, using your inheritance as bait, and when they take the bait, we'll have them dead to rights." I felt a surge of hope at his words, and I knew that with Elliot's help, I would finally be able to expose Terry and Darcy's betrayal and reclaim what was rightfully mine. They had pushed me too far, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions. With Elliot's help, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. No longer would I be a passive victim in this twisted game. I was going to take control and bring Terry and Darcy's betrayal to light. Elliot listened intently as I recounted the details of my discoveries, his brow furrowing with concern. "This is a serious situation, Marlene," he said, his voice grave. "Terry and Darcy's actions are not only unethical, but they could also be illegal. We'll need to tread carefully, but I think I know a way we can catch them red-handed." I leaned forward, my heart pounding with anticipation. "What do you have in mind?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Elliot's lips curved into a thoughtful smile. "We'll set a trap for them," he said, his eyes gleaming with a hint of mischief. "We'll arrange a meeting, one where they believe they'll finally be able to get their hands on your inheritance. But this time, we'll have the evidence we need to expose their scheme and bring them to justice." I felt a surge of hope at his words, but also a twinge of apprehension. "Are you sure this will work?" I asked, my brow furrowing with uncertainty. "What if they suspect something?" Elliot reached across the table, his hand closing gently around mine. "Trust me, Marlene," he said, his voice soft but unwavering. "I've handled cases like this before. As long as we play our cards right, we'll have them right where we want them." I nodded, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. "Okay, let's do it," I said, my voice laced with determination. "I'm ready to put an end to their betrayal once and for all." Over the next few days, Elliot and I worked tirelessly to set the trap. We enlisted the help of a private investigator, someone Elliot trusted implicitly, to gather additional evidence and help orchestrate the sting operation. The plan was simple but effective. We would arrange a meeting with Terry and Darcy, one where they believed they could finally get their hands on my inheritance. But this time, we would have the evidence we needed to expose their scheme and bring them to justice. As the day of the meeting drew near, I found myself torn between excitement and trepidation. On one hand, I was eager to see Terry and Darcy's faces when they were confronted with their own betrayal. But on the other, I couldn't help but worry that something might go wrong, that they might somehow slip through our fingers and evade the consequences of their actions. When the day finally arrived, I steeled my nerves and followed Elliot to the designated meeting place. The private investigator was already in position, hidden from view but ready to document everything that transpired. As Terry and Darcy arrived, their faces alight with barely contained greed, I felt a surge of revulsion. How could they do this to me? How could they betray the trust I had placed in them, all for the sake of their own selfish desires? But I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. Elliot greeted them warmly, his voice laced with a hint of anticipation. Well, look who's here," he said, his gaze flicking between Terry and Darcy. "I have to say I'm impressed that you two managed to keep this little scheme of yours under wraps for so long." Terry's face paled, and Darcy's eyes widened with panic. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice quivering. Elliot's smile widened, and he pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "The evidence we've gathered of your little theft operation is quite damning, I'm afraid." Terry and Darcy exchanged a desperate glance, and in that moment, I knew that our trap had worked. They were caught, and there was no way for them to wriggle out of this. "You won't get away with this," Darcy hissed, her eyes narrowing with fury. I stepped forward, my chin held high. "Oh, but we already have," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's over, Darcy. You and Terry have been exposed, and now you'll have to face the consequences of your actions." As the private investigator emerged from the shadows, camera in hand, Terry and Darcy's faces crumbled with despair. They were cornered, and they knew it. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me, tinged with a hint of sadness. After all, these were once people I had trusted, people I had cared about. But their betrayal had erased any lingering affection I might have felt. Now it was time for them to pay the price for their sins. The moment of truth had arrived. As Elliot and I sat across the table from Terry and Darcy, the tension in the air was palpable. They knew they had been caught, their elaborate scheme exposed for all to see. Elliot laid out the evidence meticulously, each document and record a damning piece of the puzzle. Terry and Darcy's faces grew more and more ashen with each passing minute, their attempts at denial becoming increasingly feeble. "You see, we have it all here," Elliot said, his voice dripping with a mixture of triumph and disgust. "The unauthorized withdrawals from Marlene's account, the paper trail of your lavish spending sprees, Darcy, and let's not forget the eyewitness accounts of your clandestine meetings." Darcy's eyes darted around the room, her manicured nails digging into the arms of her chair. "This is ridiculous," she snarled, her usual poise crumbling. "You have no proof of any wrongdoing. It's all circumstantial." "Circumstantial?" I interjected, leaning forward. "How about the fact that the moment I confronted you two, you couldn't even keep your stories straight? You gave yourselves away, plain and simple." Terry's gaze dropped to the table, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Marlene," he began, his voice trembling, "I'm so sorry. We never meant to hurt you, but the debts, the pressure." "Save it, Terry," I snapped, my anger flaring up once more. "You and Darcy conspired to steal my inheritance, to betray me in the most despicable way possible, and you expect me to just forgive you?" Elliot raised a hand, silencing Terry with a pointed look. "The time for apologies is long past," he said, his eyes hardening. "Now, it's time to face the consequences of your actions." Darcy's face contorted with rage. "Consequences?" she spat. "You think you can just waltz in here and ruin our lives? I won't let you. I have connections. Influence." "That won't help you now, Darcy," Elliot interrupted calmly. "The evidence we have is irrefutable. You and Terry are going down one way or another." The private investigator, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, stepped forward, his camera equipment at the ready. "I've documented everything," he said, his voice steady. "We have you both dead to rights." Terry's face crumpled, and he buried his head in his hands. Darcy, on the other hand, unleashed a torrent of curses, her manicured nails leaving angry red marks on her face. "This isn't over," she shrieked, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "You'll regret the day you crossed me, Marlene. I'll make you pay for this, I swear it!" I felt a shiver run down my spine at the venom in her words, but I refused to back down. "It's already over, Darcy," I said, my voice steady. "You and Terry are finished, and I plan to make sure the whole world knows about your despicable betrayal." With that, Elliot stood, signaling the private investigator to begin his work. Terry and Darcy were ushered out of the room, their protests echoing down the hallway. As I watched them go, I felt a surge of relief and vindication. Finally, after all this time, the truth had been revealed and justice would be served. Terry and Darcy would pay for their crimes, and I would reclaim what was rightfully mine. It wasn't an easy victory, but it was one I knew I had to fight for. My marriage, my inheritance, my very sense of self-worth, everything had been at stake. But now, as I stood tall in the aftermath, I knew that I had emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. This was just the beginning. I had a long road ahead, filled with legal battles and emotional turmoil, but I was ready to face it head-on, my resolve strengthened by the knowledge that I had taken back control of my life. Terry and Darcy's betrayal had shaken me to the core, but it had also awakened a determination within me. And I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I would never let anyone take advantage of me again. The fallout from the sting operation was swift and relentless. With the damning evidence that Elliot and I had gathered, Terry and Darcy's betrayal was laid bare for all to see. First, the authorities got involved. Terry was arrested for his outstanding gambling debts, the weight of his actions finally catching up with him. As he was led away in handcuffs, the look of utter despair on his face was almost enough to make me feel sorry for him. Almost. Darcy, on the other hand, faced a different kind of punishment. The slow, agonizing death of her carefully curated social standing. As the news of her involvement in the scheme spread through our small town, her once adoring friends and acquaintances turned their backs on her, one by one. I watched with a mix of satisfaction and pity as Darcy's world crumbled around her. She had always been so proud, so confident in her ability to manipulate those around her. But now she was reduced to a pariah, shunned by the very people she had once considered her inner circle. When she came to me, her perfectly manicured facade finally cracking, I felt a twinge of empathy. "Marlene, please," she pleaded, her eyes glistening with tears. "You have to help me. I can't lose everything because of this." I stared at her, my arms crossed over my chest. "Help you?" I scoffed. "After what you and Terry did to me? You betrayed my trust, stole my inheritance, and nearly destroyed my marriage. Why on earth would I ever help you?" Darcy's face twisted with rage, her desperation giving way to unbridled fury. "You self-righteous bitch," she spat. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Well, let me tell you something. You're just as much to blame for this as we are. If you hadn't been so goddamn naive, maybe we wouldn't have been able to pull this off in the first place." I felt my blood boil at her words, and I had to resist the urge to slap the arrogance right off her face. "Naive?" I hissed. "I trusted you, Darcy. I trusted both of you. And you repaid that trust by conspiring to steal everything I've worked for. You deserve every bit of the consequences you're facing." Darcy let out a bitter laugh, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Consequences, huh? You think this is the end of it? Well, let me tell you something, Marlene. This is just the beginning. I'm going to make you pay for this, for humiliating me in front of everyone. You and your precious little life are going to crumble, just like mine has." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that Darcy was capable of anything, and her threat sent a chill down my spine. But I refused to let her intimidate me. I had come too far, fought too hard, to let Darcy or Terry win. They had betrayed me, and now they would have to face the full consequences of their actions. In the days that followed, I watched as Darcy's social standing continued to unravel. Her friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with someone who had committed such a heinous act. Even her own family members turned their backs on her, unable to reconcile the person they thought they knew with the ruthless schemer that had been exposed. As for Terry, his gambling debts caught up with him, and he was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. I felt no pity for him, only a deep sense of relief that he would no longer be a part of my life. With both Terry and Darcy facing the consequences of their actions, I finally felt a sense of closure. The betrayal that had shattered my world had been exposed, and justice had been served. Now it was time for me to rebuild, to reclaim the life that had been taken from me. And this time, I vowed I would never let anyone take advantage of me again. As the dust settled and the consequences of Terry and Darcy's betrayal played out, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The weight of the past few months had taken a toll, both emotionally and physically, but I knew that I couldn't let it break me. With the help of Elliot and the legal team, I had secured my assets and initiated divorce proceedings against Terry. It was a bittersweet victory, tinged with a deep sense of loss and disappointment. After all, Terry had been my partner for nearly 2 decades, and I had truly believed that our marriage would last a lifetime. But his actions had shattered that illusion, and I knew that I needed to move forward, to reclaim my life and my independence. No longer would I be defined by the betrayals of those I had once trusted. It was time to forge a new path, one where I was in control of my own destiny. As I sat in my lawyer's office reviewing the final paperwork for the divorce, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. It was done. The chapter of my life that had been tainted by Terry and Darcy's deceit was finally closed. "You've been through so much, Marlene," Elliot said, his voice soft and reassuring. "But I'm proud of you for standing up and fighting for what's rightfully yours." I nodded. a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to do it, I said, my gaze meeting his. I couldn't just sit back and let them get away with it.